Everyone. Let's spend a little time talking about the different genres and functions of cabeza de vaca's narrative. So first off, of course, we have a little a picture of him here. What is a narrative? Well, we know it as a story, right? Whether that story is factual or fictional. A narrative is just another word for a story. How we shape narratives is called genre. So for example, you go to Netflix, you're looking for a film, you might want a romance film or a war film or a comedy, and then under all of those you have subgenres. There's black comedy or dark comedy, there's stand-up comedy, there is slapstick. So all these genres are slightly different from each other and have different characteristics. For example, we'll be reading some autobiographies, some travelogues, detective stories. We'll be looking at a lot of different genres. So a couple of ways of determining a text genre is what the writer intended it to be and what the reader experiences. So we'll begin with what Cabeza de Vaca's intentions for the text seem to be. So it's basically a self-portrait. Cabeza de Vaca offers a really complex image of himself, addressing a lot of these themes. This isn't exhaustive, there are others, but for example, he sees himself as a hero in a Spanish chivalric novel, and that means like a Spanish adventure novel. He sees himself as a hero in this way. He sees himself as an ethnographer, one who goes and describes the culture of another people. He sees himself as a naturalist, one who describes the environment through which he's moving, the plants and animals. So he has a lot of intentions as he goes through, and that's not to say that all these intentions are intentional, that he's deliberately choosing these, but these are some of the things that come out as he's writing. When he returned to Europe after this, failure of an expedition, he found there were lots of rumors spreading at home, and he wanted to set the record straight. So that's one of the reasons he had for writing the text. He, even though he had a bad experience in the New World, he still wanted to be considered for a governorship of one of the territories, and he wanted to highlight his leadership abilities in the text. He wanted to warn Europeans about some of the dangers of colonizing in the New World. So he had several purposes for writing the text. We'll come back to this image, this very unsettling image, in a moment here. The author, Cabeza de Vaca, had some intentions for what he wanted to accomplish with this text. But particularly with works that are published so far in the past, and a lot of time has gone between then and now, scholars have a lot of interpretations of what the text could mean. One of those interpretations is that we can read La Relación in the context of what's called the Black Legend. Spain received a lot of negative press for their colonizing efforts, their brutality, and some things they did and some things they were just accused of doing. But they received a pretty bad reputation for their colonization strategies. All right, I guess you could say. So the Black Legend was a style of really biased historical writing, really anti-Spanish propaganda. So going back to this engraving here from 1598, this shows a Spanish colonizer feeding Indian children to his dogs. Now, whether this ever happened or not is sort of immaterial. This is propaganda set out to make the Spanish look bad. And one of the things that de Vaca, one of the ways we could read his text as an answer to this this propaganda. Some other approaches can be seen in how these texts are translated and packaged. So I have three presses here, three organizations that put out editions of the Cabeza de Vaca text, And the University of Nebraska Press, for example, their focus in their translation was tracking Cabeza de Vaca's journey as more of a journey travelogue and a explorer of the land that he's going through. In 2002, Penguin put out an edition of the book, and their attempt was really to show the text as being an example of an origin story. So a lot of times, particularly in the lower grades, you might have started with the Puritans when you talked about American history. And Penguin was trying to bring to the forefront how many people had come here and already had settlements before the Puritans came, sort of pushing that idea of the American origins back even farther. One organization, the Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Project, that's a long name, they were interested in national origins as well, but they were looking at stressing the Spanish contributions to the creation of the Americas. And finally, there are a number of ways that we can read and look at the text. We can look at it from an examination of first contact being when two peoples come together for the first time, right? If you're a Star Trek fan, you know first contact's a really big deal, right? How do folks react when they meet other cultures for the first time? In the text, Cabeza de Vaca talks a lot about healing. He became quite the kind of healer of people. The Indians sort of saw him as almost magical, the native people, and would bring their injured and diseased people to him to try and cure. So we can look at this as being a text about folk healing. We can look at it as Cabeza de Vaca's spiritual growth. We can look at this as a frontier story. So there's lots of different ways that we can look at this narrative, lots of different kind of genres that we can examine, and it just gives us different insights into the work itself.